Welcome to the Goddesses of Social Work podcast, hosted by Renita Ray Davis, licensed clinical social worker, board-approved social work clinical supervisor, and facilitator of the Goddesses of Social Work supervision community. Join us as we travel through the social work journeys told by the Goddesses of Social Work community members, past and present, as they make their way toward clinical licensure.
Welcome to this special episode of the Goddesses of Social Work podcast. In recognition of Social Work Month, where the NASW theme for 2024 is Empowering Social Workers, Inspiring Action, Leading Change. On today's episode, we are welcoming back to the show Myliekia Francois, LMSW. Myliekia Francois is a licensed master social worker who received her master's degree from the University of Southern California in 2018 through their Advanced Standing Program. Myliekia is currently employed with the Department of Army as a Certified Employee Assistant Professional for the Army Substance Abuse Program. As a Certified Employee Assistant Professional, Myliekia engages with DoD civilians, retirees, veterans, and active duty spouses to provide short-term solution-focused counseling to address personal and or professional stressors that may be affecting their daily functioning. Myliekia also serves as a mediator with the Alternative Dispute Resolution for the United States Department of the Army. Myliekia enjoys being able to support the military community, and her role as a military spouse just makes it so much more meaningful. With just 8 years in the profession, Myliekia is excited to see what her next chapters in the social work profession will bring. Welcome back, Myliekia.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be back.
Myliekia, the motivation behind this year's theme proposed by the NASW, Empowering Social Workers, Inspiring Action, Leading Change, states that social workers need support to meet the high demand for their vital work and should get higher pay. What has been your experience with the salary gap within the social work profession? Have you had any experiences having to negotiate your salary? And if so, and or not, what advice can you give other social workers who may be struggling with salary negotiation?
Well, thank you. I think that's um a tough question, right? Um, I would say for myself, I have had moments where I have sold myself short in a sense, just because I'm just trying to get in the door. I could even say like now in my current position, but then it's all to navigate the entities or the organizations that you're trying to get into, right? Because I came in as a GS11. I probably could have asked for additional pay, but in that moment, my concern was just trying to get into the government system, so that outweighed my concern about actual pay, if that makes sense. But I think, going forward, one thing that I also have come to mind about is realizing that it's not all about pay. If you can be willing to pay for supervision, that's a nice, subsidy, right? Or if you're willing to pay for my continuing educations, or if you're willing to pay for my relicensing, even that, would be okay, if the salary wasn't as high as I wanted it to be.
That's a great answer. And so, what I heard you say was sometimes, even if the numbers don't look like what you want them to look like, what are the fringe benefits that the organization is offering?
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Myliekia, I'm curious, you do work for the federal government, and I can only imagine they probably do have set salaries for years of experience and um, licenses and all of that. Moving forward, if you decided to stay within the federal government system, do you see yourself being able to negotiate your salary within that system?
Yes. Now that I 100%. Yes, I have no doubt that, I would negotiate my pay. Because again, I think the biggest thing and most people can attest to is it's hard to get into the system. So now that I'm in it, it's like it and it's even harder to get out of it. So now I'm like, okay, yeah, I know what I bring to the table. I knew what I brought to the table then before, but I was willing to, just slide in. So now, yes, I've already, been looking at new jobs, and I'm more than willing to advocate for what I know I'm worth.
Have you been practicing? How are you preparing for these discussions?
Yeah. So more importantly, I'm more so looking at, because the military does salary ranges. So for me, it's more so asking them, hey, when are you looking to pay that range? Like what? Because like they'll start at 78 to 92. So it looks promising because you could eventually make 92, but what step is that, right? So now being able to ask that question, okay, so how close are you willing to give in between instead of starting at just the 70 or the 74, can I maybe get 80, 84, something like that. And then also just discussing the fact that, hey, I am on the road to getting my license. I'm already 1 year in. So even discussing that and then just discussing any certifications also as a justification for why, I am worth more money than just the initial starting pay.
Great answer, Myliekia. All right, so let's move on to the next NASW theme, which is inspiring action.
Okay.
The NASW has shared in its press release and proclamation for Social Work Month that social work is one of the fastest growing professions in the United States, and that we are on the front line for some of the toughest crises this nation has ever faced. Can you give me an example or examples of your frontline experiences? And what advice would you give to social workers entering the field over the next few years?
Yes, I think that's a great question. For me, I don't know if you're familiar, but before moving to Alabama, we lived in El Paso, Texas. And I actually lived in El Paso when the mass shooting happened in 2019. And so during that time, I was a discharge planner for the hospital that several of the victims went to. And I actually did discharge planning for several of the victims. The survivors, and one of which their family member was a victim. So even being in the room with that family member, when they had to have those type of discussions about, where that was and trying to locate family members during that time. So that was my first, experience with a mass shooting. And even handling that as well as because I was working two jobs. I was PRN at the hospital as a discharge planner, and then I was doing my behavioral health specialist job full time with our National Guard soldiers. So engaging with them as well during that time and supporting them because a lot of our National Guard soldiers were residents of El Paso. So just working through that and that secondary trauma that came from that fear, right? Because even we frequented the Cella Vista Mall that is next to that Walmart. And if it wasn't a drill weekend that weekend, me and my husband probably would have been at the mall because that's just something we did. So just rationalizing that and just seeing the beauty of that community during that time and how everybody pulled together to support one another was just remarkable, to say the least. So, and then even just seeing the country, because, of course, during that time, the hashtag El Paso Strong was going around. And so just being able to just see how, the country pulled together, how that community pulled together to support one another was just, again, like I said, it was just remarkable and just a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Thank you so much for your work during that time. And thank your husband for his service as well. Yeah. So we are on the front lines, right? And just hearing
Yeah.
that particular story and knowing that social work again is one of the fastest growing professions, and someone hearing your story who's trying to decide whether to come into this field or not, it's like, oh my, you guys are doing that type of work. What advice or what would you say to social workers entering the profession?
I would just say tap into your strengths, because again, I wasn't prepared to deal with that. I would have never thought anything like that would have happened in that community or that I would even be in a community that would be affected by a mass shooting, right? But I think it's just tapping into your strengths because in that moment, I just had to go to what I knew, right? And just just remembering that this field just has so much room for us to grow. And we have the ability to impact so many different people with just, just being a social worker, right? Just showing up. Because in that moment, for some people, all I could do, right? Because some of them, they weren't ready to discharge. But even just going in and checking in on them and or providing their family with some support that they needed, right, was enough.
Holding space. Yeah, holding space.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Myliekia, and then I'm gonna move on to our last question. How did you take care of you during that period?
I think a lot of it was just talking with my other coworkers, my other counterparts, the other, behavioral health specialists, as well as the discharge planners that worked at the hospital, just talking with them because again, they're the only ones that could understand what we were seeing, what we were going through, and that so just even, expressing to them, my condolences, right? Because again, I had just become adopted into their community, right? But that had been home to them all their lives. So even just being able to communicate with them and just see their strength, right? And just see their love for their community was enough to just be like, okay, it's going to be okay,
Yeah, yeah. I think your strength is seeing the strengths in others. Yeah, I love that. I was gonna ask you, but I pieced that out. So I love
Yes.
that. Yeah. Our last question in this special episode, Myliekia, is you're going to be an LICSW in the next year or so. That is the
Yeah.
highest license for, I know, yeah. Let's take a moment. Yeah.
Yes. Ah.
I can't wait.
Me
But that
either.
is the highest license recognized by this profession. With that license comes an energy of leadership within our profession. How do you see yourself as an agent of change? And what changes would you like to see happen within social work?
Hmm. That's a hard one, right? Because there's so many things that I could say I would like to see change for, um, or to even be a change agent in. Um, but I think for the main point, I just want to be able to pave a way for social workers that are coming behind me. Because even in my current position that I'm in, like I'm already like, okay, if I extend past hopefully my intern that's going to be coming, hopefully she could take the position, right? So that she'll have an entry level position to get into the government where, because I know how hard it is. I have been trying for years, actually 5 years to get into the government, right? As a military spouse. So for me, I'm like, if I could just open up the door for her and even for our community, of, hey, if you want to get into the government system, let me help you. Here's some resources to get you into the government system. Is that if that's where you want to be? I think that's just my biggest thing. I just always want to be able to be, you know, someone that's uplifting someone else to be able to do what they want to do in this profession.
That's the epitome of leadership right there. Yeah. One of the things that I just loved about that was sometimes we can see social workers staying in positions way past the expiration date, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And so for you to already be in that mindset of when my intern comes, I want to train her well or him well enough to take on this position because I'm getting ready to move on to my next profession, my next position. And that's what propels the profession too,
Right.
is as we continue to advance and move forward, preparing those who are coming behind us, we don't get stuck, we don't stay past our expiration date, and we continue to expand the profession in that way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that's just my biggest thing, because I know what's for me is for me. I don't have to gatekeep. I don't need to do all that. If you want the position, hey, I'll lay the groundwork for you to get it, and I'm gonna move on to bigger and greener pastures.
That's my favorite thing. I love it. I absolutely love it. Myliekia, this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much. I am excited to hear about how you navigate the waters of salary negotiation. I know you're going to be excellent in it, standing on your square and teaching and modeling for those around you and others how to do the same. So happy Social Work Month.
Thank you. Happy Social Work Month to you as well.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Goddesses of Social Work podcast. We are glad you were here. If you like this episode, please come back to hear more stories of the journeys through social work, and please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. See you next time here on the Goddesses of Social Work podcast.